Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to provide a little update on what I've read so far in 2024 and update you on my reading goals. So starting off with the first book I read this year, The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This is Britney's memoir about her life spanning from when she was born up until now, covering all the juicy details that you obviously want. I know some people weren't a fan of this one, but honestly, I really enjoyed it. I think that's because I knew nothing about Britney Spears going in, so all of the details were new to me. I know they weren't new for everybody, but I really enjoyed learning about her life because I truly knew nothing before besides what I had seen on the news. I really enjoy how you can tell that she had a big part in this, I think anyway, because of the way it's written. It's not super literary, it's not super beautifully written, I guess. I don't know. I think you can just hear her voice throughout, and I really appreciate that. I did give it a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads too. If you're looking for a celebrity memoir, why don't you go ahead and give it a shot. Next, I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I did do a full video on this where I built Hope's End in The Sims while also giving a review, so if you're interested in that, go ahead and check it out. This book follows a home care nurse who gets a job at Hope's End taking care of Lenora Hope, who is suspected to have killed her family one night in 1920. This wasn't my favorite of Riley Sager's. I've liked a lot of his stuff before, and this one just didn't do it for me. I felt like there were just way too many plot twists at the end that made sense but didn't really build there necessarily. I would have liked more like Easter eggs or little hints at where the story was going, and I didn't feel like that was there, which kind of made it feel like it was a plot twist just to have a plot twist. One of my reading goals this year was to read through all of my want to reads on Goodreads. I'd like to clear that list out and really make it a place for like what I'm going to read next, rather than kind of like just a holding space for any book that at one point I thought sounded kind of good. So this next book, Still Missing by Chevy Stevens, has probably been on my want to read for 2.5 to 3 years. So it was about time that I finally got and read it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Many of the books that I've read this year have been pretty good, so many of them are getting 4 out of 5. This book follows a girl who has been kidnapped and imprisoned in a remote cabin for a year. It follows a year in her life as she's recounting the story to her therapist. So it follows the past and then kind of talks about in the present and where this is going. Definitely look up trigger warnings for this. You can only imagine what trigger warnings are in this story about a girl who's been kidnapped and imprisoned. So definitely look that up before reading this. This ended up having a twist ending, which I did not see coming, and I think made the book a lot better than where it was heading in the first half. So I really enjoyed that. It definitely wasn't something I was expecting. The graphic nature of it did turn me off a little bit, just because it's most of the time when I read graphic, it's through horror, as in like body horror or a murderer, and this horror was a little too real for me, which kind of turned me off, but obviously that's not the author's fault. This year, I finally finished the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. I started reading this book because Brandon Sanderson is my husband's favorite author, and I wanted a way to read some of his books that weren't so heavy in the sci-fi and fantasy world building, and this series was kind of perfect for that. This book follows Spensa as she's escaped the nowhere and is now trying to take down the evil superiority and get independence for her planet and the human race. I wasn't a huge fan of the Skyward series. It was pretty good. Again, I really was just reading it to connect with my husband on the author that he really enjoys. But that being said, this book made me cry 3, 4, 5 times. I thought this was an incredible ending to this series. It was satisfying in all of the right ways. According to Tyler, that's what Brandon Sanderson does really well, and I definitely agree just based on this one series. It does lean more young adult, and for that, that's not really my cup of tea, so it was a little challenging for me to want to pick up and read. I've become a really big genre reader, so that if there is not a who killed her, what happened, what are they hiding line in it, I find it really challenging to read. So there was that present for me in this, but I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. This is definitely one of my top 5 books that I've read this year. This year I started a book club, and so our first read this year was The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I have never heard of this author before. She wrote another book that is kind of popular right now on Book Talk, but I knew nothing about this book or her getting into it. This book is about a wedding that takes place on a remote Irish island, and it follows 6 people's stories from when they arrive on the island to when someone is inevitably murdered. I was a little probably too generous in this score. I gave it a 3 out of 5. probably deserved a 2 out of 5. This was not my cup of tea. It's definitely one of those for everybody type of thrillers. It's really fast paced. I read it in like a day or two, even though I didn't really particularly enjoy it. There's lots of things happening, lots of POVs. Chapters are super short, so this is pretty easy for everyone to get into the genre and go ahead and start reading. It would be a great pool read for just how quick that it goes by. But I was really, really turned off by the 6 POVs in this book. 6 POVs. Every chapter is only 5 to 6 pages. They are not super long chapters. So all in all, I think that you probably hear from everyone maybe a total of 30 pages throughout. It's not that long of a book. And for me, that made it really hard to connect with anybody and to, I don't know, like it, just way too many. And by the end, you understand like why it had to be in 6 POVs. Like it makes sense why she made the choice, but I don't know. It just really, really turned me off. If I were going to write this book, I think that I would rather have it be told through the +1 and have her kind of learn all of these secrets about everybody through conversations, because everyone can get drunk. It's a wedding. There's a great place for them to reveal these deep, dark secrets through her accidentally hearing things in a corridor because it's an island, a small mansion. I don't know. I felt like there were ways that it would have been a lot more interesting to reveal what they revealed rather than trying to tell the story through 6 different people. The next book I read was The Martian. One of my goals is to read through all of the books on my bookshelf so that I can say that I've read everything that I own. And this book was next up on that. I read this one. I had started it once before and didn't finish it. I'm not quite sure the first time why I didn't finish it. This is another sci-fi book. I know I've already talked about a lot of sci-fi books, but sci-fi is really not my cup of tea. And this one is very heavy in the science of the science fiction, not so much of the fictional part, even though it does take place in the future. I have a master's degree in biology education, so I understood even most of the science that they were talking about, and for me, just didn't really do it for me. I've read other books by Andy Weir that I liked a lot better. Again, this one is good, worth the read, especially if you are into the science fiction genre, but probably wouldn't have picked it up naturally if I didn't own it and wanted to get it off of my TBR shelf. Next, I read The Fury. I read The Silent Patient either last year or the year before, and so I was really excited to see what he was going to do with this book. It is very psychological thriller, as he kind of does. This one I would say is a little more, I don't know, it's very different from The Silent Patient. It's definitely both still a thriller, but kind of from a different point of view, I guess, in that regard. I gave this one a 5 out of 5. This is another ending that I did not see coming. I did not think that this is where this book was going to go. Based on kind of the back cover, I thought this was going to be a little bit more of a supernaturally thriller, but it ended up staying very within the realm of human possibility, I guess. So I didn't really get what I expected, but I think that was good. I really liked where it went. 5 out of 5 for me. This book satisfied 2 reading goals for me. The first one is that it was on my want to read list on Goodreads, which I'm trying to clear out. And I also want to read around the world, where I try to read at least one book set on a different continent by the end of 2024. So both this book and the guest list checked off Europe for me. Next, I read Mr. Magic by Kirsten White. This book follows a group of former child stars as they meet in the Utah desert to film a reunion podcast featuring their time on this children's show. But this children's show has no living recordings, no production company, and no one can really figure out who Mr. Magic actually was. I overall enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5, but I felt it was a little too far out there for my liking. I don't really enjoy cosmic horror, and I didn't think that was where this was going to end up when I got into it. I would recommend reading the author's acknowledgement after, because I learned on Goodreads that she kind of talks about her inspiration for the books in her About the Author acknowledgement section. And I felt that added another layer to me that made it worth reading and worth finishing. Once you kind of learned that, the choices that she made and the storyline and the plot all kind of make more sense. There's a pro to that, there's a con to that. Obviously, you should be able to kind of understand what she's trying to allude to without needing to read her acknowledgments, but I did think it gave me a very interesting angle. If you are a fan of cosmic horror, if you want to read something a little bit weird, this one is definitely something that you should check out. Wasn't my cup of tea, but in the end, it did get 4 out of 5 stars for me. Next, I read A Map in the Dark by Karen Ellis. This was another book that I had on my bookshelf that I needed to finish. This book follows an FBI agent who is an acclaimed missing children's FBI agent, and it follows a disappearance of a teenager in New York City. This book was good. It was fine. I gave it 4 out of 5 because it got very interesting towards the end, but it was a very classic police procedural. It reminded me a little bit of Broadchurch, but not because it was as good as Broadchurch, but just because some of the themes and the way it was told were similar. I owned it. I read it. It was all right. I also had my next read be one that I had owned, and I read A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I'm an English teacher. It was about time I read this classic one. Here's another science fiction book. I swear I don't like science fiction as much as my reads this year would say that I did. This book follows a utopian society where humans are bred. That's kind of the basis of the book. Basically, no one has really any attachments to one another. You don't marry, you don't have children. You just kind of live your life to the best of your ability and you have fun while living it. I had never read this before, nor had I known anything about it besides knowing that the first 2 chapters were famous. I kind of knew that it started with the factory tour, but I had no idea where this was heading. I surprisingly really enjoyed this. It is a little heavier of a science fiction-y book than the other ones that I've read so far, but it was a quick read for me. I was really interested in what it had to say and the way it was describing the society. That kind of kept me pushing through to see where it ended up. I've become a genre reader. In most of the horror and thriller books I end, they're going to survive, they're going to die, they're going to catch the killer, they're not going to catch the killer. But this one I had no idea where it was going to go because it's not obviously set up like one of those books, so that alone kept me reading to try to figure out what story was this going to ultimately tell. I also gave this one a 4 out of 5. I don't think I would ever want to teach it. I'm an English teacher. I don't think I'd ever want to reread it necessarily, but I can now say that I read this classic novel. There were lots of references to The Tempest in it. Obviously, it's called Brave New World, and I had just finished that with my students, so that kind of also added another element of enjoyment for me, being able to see all those references to Shakespeare and The Tempest. So next I read We Should All Be Feminists. I did not realize this one was only an essay, so I did also finish this one in one day. This was pretty good. I would say this was kind of feminism 101, so if you were looking for a place to start reading feminist literature, this would be a good place to start. Basically just an essay on feminism and why we should all be one, why we needed it. The next book I read was Read Aside by Kelly Gallagher. If you're an English teacher and you're looking for ways to improve your reading instruction, I think this would be a great place to start. It is a little frustrating because some of the things I just can't necessarily do with the curriculum I teach, so that was a bummer, but even though I teach a semi-canned curriculum, I did learn a lot about the science of reading and how I could incorporate more authentic reading practices into my classroom. Also, if you are not a high school or middle school English teacher specifically, this book probably isn't going to be much interest to you either. There's a couple practices that you could incorporate that are in there, but a good half of the book focuses on how to teach novels better, how to teach longer passages better. That I think would be harder to translate over if you were like a science teacher. While you're reading in your science classroom, a lot of these strategies might not be able to translate as well. The next book I read, which I also now own and was on my want to read list on Goodreads, was What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher. I think I have read almost all of their horror-y books by now. I own now 3 of them. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I did not enjoy it as much as What Moves the Dead. I really would have enjoyed if she would have adapted another classic horror novel to follow up from that book, because this is a sequel to that one. This book follows Alex Easton after their horrifying ordeal at the Usher Manor in What Moves the Dead. Alex heads back to their home country of Galatia, where they return to their old manor and discover the housekeeper has been killed in a mysterious way that no one in the village wants to talk about. So Alex plunges a little deeper into what happened there. It was paced similarly to the first one, but just took a very different angle, which I did enjoy. I did like it, but not as much as I loved that first one. I gave that one a 5 out of 5. This book is short, just like all of her other horror ones are, so this is a nice quick read. Out of the 3 that I've read, I would probably put this second. I'd probably put it above A House with Good Bones, but it would probably be pretty close to that one. And the most recent book I've read so far this year is This Wretched Valley by Jenny Kiefer. Oh my god, this is by far the best book that I've read this year. This is the easiest 5 out of 5 I have given on Goodreads to date. This book follows 4 friends, one working on their PhD dissertation, his research assistant, a girl who is trying to make her name for herself in rock climbing, her boyfriend, and their dog. If you're a fan of The Blair Witch Project, Until Dawn, The Ritual, this book is right up your alley. I don't remember the last time I have been actively horrified while reading a book, so that says a lot. I had to stop reading this book 1 hour before bed because it gave me nightmares the first night I read it, and so I had to cut myself off every night. The first chapter pretty explicitly tells you how this book is going to end, and I felt like that was a really bold choice to make, and it was perfect, because if at any point you felt like there was a snippet of hope, it was quickly extinguished, because you know how this book ends, because she told you right away in the beginning. This is an adventure horror book, which I really enjoy. It does have some supernatural elements, some cosmic horror elements to it. If any of that sounds like something you would enjoy, you are probably going to love this book. I cannot say enough good things about this book. This is a debut novel you never would have known, because she does an incredible job at writing this story. And I'm really excited to see if and what she will write next. So definitely check out This Wretched Valley. So those are all the books that I have read so far in 2024. I have read 14 out of 45 books this year, and I am 5 books ahead of schedule according to Goodreads. As far as my other goals, I am trying to read around the world. I have Europe checked off. I think I'm going to check off the United States, North America, after I've read This Wretched Valley, and then Mr. Magic, which takes place in Utah. So I have obviously 5 more continents to get to, hoping I can find one in Antarctica that I haven't already read. I'm going to try to read The Resort as my book for Asia, and probably one other to check off that continent. This was my February or March book of the month book, so I'm definitely going to want to start reading this, because now my books that I've owned that I haven't read has now gotten one bigger. I've probably made the best progress on reading through the books on my bookshelf that I haven't read yet. So far, I have 2 Book of the Month books that got added to it, and I also saw this new adaptation of A Haunting of Hill House. Not counting those 3 new books that I got, I still have 3 books that were on my bookshelf at the beginning of the year that I hadn't read yet, so I'm making really good progress on that one. I think I'll probably be done by the summer. As far as my want to read list on Goodreads, there are currently 7 on it, which is, I think, less than what I started with. Since the beginning of this year, I only have 4 left that were on at the beginning of this year that are still on it. I've added 3 other ones that I've kind of just seen pop up, so, including one of my next book club reads. I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at so far in 2024. I've really enjoyed all the books I've read. I think there was only one that I really didn't enjoy, and it was my book club read, unfortunately, but overall, I'm having a pretty good reading year. Let me know what your favorite book that you've read so far of 2024 is in the comments below, and I will see you next time.